Marxist Dialectics on Possibility and Actuality. Written by M. V. Taranchuk. Core argument: the Marxist-Leninist framework critique of pre-Marxist philosophy. The author asserts that pre-Marxist philosophy failed to correctly understand the concepts of possibility and actuality. This failure stemmed from treating them as abstract, intellectual categories disconnected from the practical, material struggle to revolutionize the world. The Marxist solution: Marxism-Leninism is presented as the only philosophy capable of correctly solving this question because it links it directly to the revolutionary struggle of the proletariat. The works of Lenin and Stalin are credited with providing a complete and comprehensive resolution to this issue. Connection to revolutionary practice. The question of turning possibility into actuality became critically important during the era of imperialism and proletarian revolutions. The Communist Party needed to understand how the possibility of a proletariat victory over capitalism could be transformed into a reality. The central distinction: real versus abstract possibility. Abstraktная возможность. This is a possibility based merely on formal logic or theoretical constructs without any basis in objective, concrete historical conditions. It lacks the necessary prerequisites in reality to ever be actualized. For all practical purposes, an abstract possibility is indistinguishable from an impossibility. Real possibility. Realная возможность. This type of possibility is grounded in and determined by the existing concrete historical conditions. It arises from the existing reality as a lawful necessity. Crucially, the conditions for its transformation into actuality already exist within that same historical context. Only a real possibility can become an actuality. Examples of abstract, unreal possibilities: the author argues that exploiting classes and their servants often promote abstract possibilities to deceive the oppressed masses. Planned capitalism. The theories of bourgeois thinkers and figures like Karl Kautsky, ultra-imperialism, suggesting that capitalism can eliminate anarchy of production and be centrally planned, are dismissed as abstract. Lenin and Stalin are cited to argue that as long as private property and the profit motive exist, a planned economy is impossible. Democratic socialism. The ideology of the British Labour Party is presented as a prime example of a fraudulent, abstract possibility. Their idea of achieving socialism without class struggle, through revolution by common consent and collaboration with the bourgeoisie, is a lie to pacify the working class. The nationalization of industries like coal mining is described not as a step toward socialism, but as a bailout for capitalists who wanted to get rid of unprofitable, technologically backward assets at the state's expense. Formal bourgeois rights. The rights and equal opportunities proclaimed in bourgeois constitutions, e.g. in the USA, are described as purely formal and abstract. Real equality is impossible between the owner and the worker, the exploiter and the exploited. The author points to property and racial restrictions, e.g. discrimination against black people in the U.S., and the persecution of the Communist Party as proof that these equal possibilities are not real. The dynamic nature of possibility. The relationship between abstract and real possibilities is not static, but changes with historical conditions. From abstract to real, an idea that is abstract in one era can become a real possibility in another when material conditions change. Examples: human flight and underwater navigation were once fantasies, but became real with technological development. Interplanetary travel may follow this path. Political example: the idea of bypassing capitalism to build socialism was an abstract and reactionary idea for 19th century Russia. However, after the October Revolution, it became a real possibility for less developed nations within the USSR, like the Yakuts and Buryat Mongols, to transition to socialism with the help of the Russian proletariat. From real to abstract. A possibility that was once real can become abstract under new conditions. Example: Marx and Engels considered a peaceful transition to socialism a possibility for mid-19th century England and America, where militarism and bureaucracy were less developed. However, Lenin and Stalin argued that in the 20th century era of imperialism, this possibility had vanished, making a violent overthrow of the bourgeois state necessary. The transformation of possibility into actuality struggle is essential. Possibility does not automatically become actuality. It is a complex process that is resolved through struggle and human activity. In nature, the transformation happens through the interaction of blind, elemental forces. In antagonistic societies, capitalism history is made by people, but their conflicting class interests mean the final result is chaotic and unpredictable. The transformation from possibility to actuality occurs through class struggle. In socialist society, because class antagonisms are eliminated, the will of the people can be unified and directed by the party towards a common goal. The transformation is a conscious, planned process where the intended goal and the final result coincide. Not automatic. Even under socialism, progress requires a constant struggle of the new against the old. The existence of multiple competing possibilities at any given time makes this struggle a complex, but necessary part of development. The role of class struggle in actualizing competing possibilities. In an antagonistic, class-based society, every existing possibility is backed by a specific social class or group. Each class struggles to turn the possibility that serves its own interests into a reality. Struggle determines the outcome. Quoting Stalin, the author states that when several possibilities exist simultaneously, only one can become actuality. The others are eliminated through the process of struggle. Progress is not automatic. The possibility that aligns with the progressive development of society, the new fighting the old, has the greatest chance of success. However, its victory is not automatic or guaranteed. History is not a straight line. The author cites Lenin, stating that viewing history as a smooth, forward march is unscientific and non-dialectical. History is a zigzag path, with temporary setbacks, defeats for progressive forces, and triumphs for reaction. The resistance of dying classes, reactionary forces, do not give up their power voluntarily. As Stalin noted, dying classes will use every last ounce of their strength to defend their existence, actively hindering the actualization of progressive possibilities. The decisive factor, the question of which possibility becomes reality, is ultimately decided by the correlation of the struggling forces. The victory of a progressive possibility depends on the ability of its proponents to utilize all available conditions and suppress the resistance of reactionary forces. Critique of erroneous views on possibility and actuality. The text identifies and critiques two politically harmful, anti-scientific viewpoints: fatalism and subjectivism. 1. Fatalism and the theory of spontaneity. The fatalist view. Fatalists wrongly equate possibility with actuality. They believe that if a possibility exists, it will realize itself spontaneously and automatically, irrespective of conscious human action. This leads to passivity and submission to fate. Political consequence. Fatalism serves to disarm the proletariat in its revolutionary struggle. It has historically been used to justify opportunism and betrayal of the working class. The theory of spontaneity, theoria stickinostidis, is the logical foundation of all opportunism. It denies the role of the conscious, organized struggle of the working class. Its proponents, like the Mensheviks in Russia, argued that once conditions matured, capitalism would simply grow into socialism on its own, without a revolution. Bukharin's theory of drift, theoria samothuka. This was a variation used by counter-revolutionaries like Bukharin. They argued that the peasant villages would automatically drift behind the socialist city, thus justifying an action against the kulaks, wealthy peasants, and opposing the active socialist transformation of agriculture. Stalin is cited as denouncing this as a counter-revolutionary, anti-Marxist theory. Stalin's critique. The text quotes Stalin extensively to refute fatalism. He argued that a revolutionary crisis does not guarantee the fall of the bourgeoisie. Victory never comes by itself. It must be prepared for and won by a strong, authoritative revolutionary party capable of leading the masses. 2. Subjectivism and adventurism. The subjectivist view. This is the opposite error. It ignores objective conditions and possibilities, believing that history is made solely by the will and desires of great personalities or heroes. Historical examples. In Russia, this view was characteristic of the Narodniks, socialist revolutionaries, SRs, and anarchists. Political consequence. Subjectivism leads to adventurism. Left deviations. Within the party, subjectivism manifested as left deviations. Trotskyists, for example, are accused of using ultra-revolutionary phrases to mask their counter-revolutionary actions and adventurism. The Marxist-Leninist synthesis. Unity of objective and subjective factors the correct path. In contrast to both fatalism and subjectivism, the correct view taught by Lenin and Stalin is that transforming possibility into reality requires a unity of objective possibility and the conscious, purposeful activity of people. Primacy of objective conditions. The foundation for any action must be the material conditions of society, which exist independently of human will. People can only tackle tasks for which the objective possibilities for a solution already exist or are emerging. Human action is decisive. While objective possibilities are necessary, they are not sufficient. The active, organized work of people, led by the Revolutionary Party, is the decisive force that turns a possibility into an actuality, creating possibilities. Furthermore, human activity not only realizes possibilities, but also creates them. The industrialization of the USSR and collectivization of its agriculture, achieved through the struggle of the Soviet people under the party's leadership, created the very possibility of victory in the Great Patriotic War, World War II. The Soviet system and the possibility of socialism, the source of possibilities. The author argues that the teachings of Lenin and Stalin on building socialism in a single country most fully develop the question of turning possibility into reality. The Soviet system is presented as creating exceptional and unprecedented possibilities for development. Possibility versus actuality, a crucial distinction attributed to Stalin, is made between possibility and actuality. The Soviet system provided the possibility to build socialism, but this did not mean socialism was a finished product. Stalin is quoted, "One must strictly distinguish between the possibilities available in our system and the use of these possibilities, the transformation of these possibilities into reality." Competing possibilities. The real possibility of building socialism existed alongside a competing possibility, the restoration of capitalism. This counter-possibility was backed by capitalist elements in the cities and villages. The transformation of socialism from a possibility into a reality was therefore decided by the class struggle of the working class against these elements. The decisive role of the party and the struggle against enemies the party as the decisive force. In the Soviet system, where the chaotic laws of capitalism no longer dominate, the Bolshevik Party and the Soviet state play the decisive role in transforming possibility into reality. Victory, as Stalin noted, never comes by itself. It is usually dragged into existence. Prerequisites for victory. The party's success depended on its ability to correctly identify and evaluate possibilities. Establish a correct political line. Find the key paths and means to turn possibility into reality. The necessity of defeating internal enemies. The text emphasizes that the defeat of Trotskyists, Bukharinists, and bourgeois nationalists was a necessary condition for the victory of socialism. Trotskyists are accused of directly denying the possibility of building socialism in one country and actively working to restore capitalism. Bukharinists are accused of a more insidious betrayal. While formally acknowledging the possibility of socialism, they fought against the party's methods, industrialization, collectivization, and promoted the theory of drift, samathuk, arguing that socialism would emerge spontaneously without class struggle. This was seen as no different from the Trotskyist denial and a cover for their own anti-socialist agenda. From possibility to actuality. The importance of skillful action, the subjective factor, is key. Stalin is cited as placing the greatest importance on the party's skill umenya, in correctly using possibilities. Without this skill, opportunities can be missed. A practical example. The author notes that in 1930, the National Economic Plan was underfulfilled, achieving 25% industrial growth instead of the planned 31 to 32%. Stalin's analysis was that all objective possibilities for success existed, What was lacking was the skill to use the available possibilities and the skill to correctly manage the factories, plants, and mines. Organization is decisive. Once the correct political line is set, success is 9/10 dependent on organizational work. This includes selecting and placing cadres correctly and mobilizing the masses to overcome difficulties. The next stage, the possibility of building communism a new conclusion. After socialism became a reality, Stalin is credited with developing a new conclusion. The possibility of building a full communist society in a single country, especially one like the Soviet Union. Prerequisites for communism. This transition requires economic supremacy, surpassing the advanced capitalist countries economically to create an abundance of consumer goods. Eliminating contradictions, overcoming the opposition between town and country, and between mental and physical labor. A new consciousness, raising the consciousness of the Soviet people to a much higher level, and eradicating the remnants of capitalism from their minds. Defense, ensuring the defense of the communist construction from external attack, as capitalism still exists in the world. Sources of possibility. The possibility of building communism flows directly from the socialist reality. Public ownership of the means of production, the elimination of exploitation, a planned economy, and the guiding role of the Communist Party. The creative power of the masses in building communism, a new attitude to labor. Under socialism, labor is transformed from a curse into a matter of honor, valor, and heroism. This new attitude, combined with a socialist discipline of labor, creates immense possibilities for raising productivity to a level unattainable under capitalism. Uncovering new possibilities. The people themselves, through their creative labor, not only realize existing possibilities, but constantly uncover and create new ones. Socialist competition. Initiatives like socialist competition are highlighted as a powerful force. The patriotic movement for above-plan savings and for accelerating the turnover of working capital are cited as examples of the masses finding new ways to strengthen the economy. Grand projects. The Stalin Plan for the Transformation of Nature, a massive plan for afforestation and irrigation to combat drought, is presented as a task of a scale that could only be dreamed of before socialism, but which became a real, planned possibility under the Soviet system. Conclusion. The text concludes that the Soviet people, led by the Communist Party and Stalin, are confidently marching towards communism by realizing existing possibilities and creating new ones through their creative labor. The successful struggle to fulfill the post-war 5-year plan is seen as a major step in turning the possibility of communism into a reality.